In this video, I am going to show you how we can configure OSPF as a routing protocol between PE and CE in different types. You know that we learned how we can configure OSPF between PE and CE in previous scenario, and this is the next scenario, and in this scenario we will talk about again configuration of the OSPF as a PE-CE routing protocol, but in different conditions. Okay, let me to review these conditions first, and after that we can talk about the configuration. This scenario is a practice about the OSPF as a routing protocol between PE and CE. Maybe you experience some of these types of using of the OSPF in the previous video, but let me to start again talking about the OSPF configuration in different kinds. It is a practice. Okay, let me to start with the first scenario. This is the first scenario. In this scenario, I am using the service provider as a MPLS VPN super backbone, as I mentioned before, and also in the PE1 and PE2 we have area 0. This means that we are using area 0 in both PEs. This is the first type of the scenario, and also in the next scenario we are using area 2 connected to the for example the PEs. You know that MPLS super backbone is like a VPN, is like a area 0. Because of that we can connect area 2 to each other with MPLS VPN super backbone. And in this scenario here we have area 0 and then area 4, and we need a virtual link to connecting this area 0 to the next area 0. Let me to talk about this in the for example this scenario, and after that in the final scenario we have area 0 connected to 2 PE routers, and after that we have area 3 and area 4. We will talk about the detail of configuration of these scenarios. Let me to start with the configuration of the first scenario, R1, R2, and R2. This is similar to the configuration in the previous video. I'm using a notepad file. In notepad file, I configured inside of the service provider. Let me to review the configuration of the R1 and R2 and R3. After that, we can configure area 0. For every area, I'm using only one loopback interface. I will talk about that. Look at here. In the router 1, I configured the router 1 with the IP addressing and also with the OSPF, and also I enabled the MPLS on this router. Only I'm going to review. Host name is R1, then I configured MPLS label range, then interface fast Ethernet 00, this interface, and after that if you want you can see the interfaces labels. Okay, look at here, this is the interfaces labels. And then I configured IP OSPF1 area 0 inside of the service provider, IP OSPF network point, and then no shutdown. About fast Ethernet 01, we have similar configuration, IP addressing, then OSPF configuration. And after that, I configured OSPF1 with the MPLS LDP auto config. This is the configuration of R1. You know that in R1 we don't have BGP. And also in the router 2, I configured the MPLS label range. After that, interface fast Ethernet 00, this interface with the OSPF1 enabled on this interface, and after that we have one loopback 0 for establishing BGP neighborship between router 2 and router 3. And after that I enabled OSPF as the IGP routing protocol in R2, MPLS LDP auto config. And finally I configured BGP. This is the configuration of R2. And also in R3 we have the similar configuration, enconft hostname R3, then MPLS label range. After that I configured OSPF on the fast Ethernet 00 with IP addressing, and then I configured one loopback 0 on the router 3, and after that router OSPF 1. Okay, and finally the MPLS LDP auto config and BGP configuration. Because you learn about this type of configuration in the previous scenario, I am not going to delve to the detail of service provider configuration. We are only configuring the loopback, the area 0s connected to the R2 and R3. Now we can start the configuration. Look at here in router 2. Okay, we have BGP neighborship. We can review show BGP VPN v4 unicast all summary. Okay, we have neighborship with the router 3. Now we can start the configuration of the router 2. You know that here we have area 0. For both area 0, I'm using one interface loopback. For example, in the router 2, we can configure a VRF definition A. Okay, and then we can configure RD 65,000 colon 1 and then address family IPv4. For example, we can configure route target both and then 65,000 colon 1. This is the VRF definition. Then we can configure one loopback interface loopback 1. This is the member of the area 0 in the VRF-A, and let me to use VRF forwarding A. After that, IP address. For example, you can configure quad 2, then quad 255. This is a loopback interface in the VRF-A. Okay, I configure loopback 1 in the area 0, and because of that, we need to configure another OSPF instance, router OSPF2 VRF-A. Okay, and then router ID can be configured to quad 2, and after that, let me to use net for quad 2 quad 0 area 0. We configured area 0 on this loopback interface. Here we have interface, okay, loopback 1. This is the configuration, and then we need another loopback 1 on the router 3, but before that we can configure router BGP 65,000 address family IPv4 VRF-A. Please redistribute OSPF, for example 2, because this is the OSPF instance of VRF-A, and after that router OSPF2 VRF-A please redistribute BGP 65,000 subnets. That's it. And after that, we need to configure the R3. In R3, again, we need one VRF, show VRF. We don't have VRF, conf-t, VRF-A, and or VRF definition A, okay, RD 65,000, or for example, 65,000 colon 1, route target both can be configured with the 65,000 colon 1. First, we need to use address family IPv4, then route target both 65,000 colon 1. After that, we need to configure one loopback 1 interface with the VRF forwarding A. And after that, IP address can be configured to quad 3, quad 255. Now we need to configuring OSPF process 2, router OSPF2 in VRF-A. Router ID is quad 3 for this VRF, and then network quad 3, quad 0, area 0. Okay, then redistribute BGP 65,000, and after that subnets, and after that router BGP 65,000 in address family IPv4 VRF-A. Please redistribute OSPF2. That's it. This is the configuration of this scenario. Let me to show you the result. In R2, we can use show IP route VRF-A. Look at here, in VRF-A, we have one connected network and also one BGP received network. It's okay. And also in router 3, you can use show IP route VRF-A. Okay, here again we have one BGP receive routes and also one connected network. It's so easy. And also, you know that we configured, for example, in R3 redistributing BGP to OSPF, because here we don't have any OSPF neighbor. It is not necessary, but I configured it because in most cases we are using the redistribution of BGP into the OSPF when we want another neighbors here. Because of that, I configured this. But if you want, you can do, for example, don't configure this. Look at here, for example, in R2. Now, in the router BGP 65,000, let me to show you, router BGP 65,000, address family IPv4 unicast VRF-A. We don't need to redistribute BGP to OSPF. No redistribute. For example, in the OSPF, we need to configure router OSPF2, no redistribute BGP 65,000, because here we don't have any other router. And in R3 also, conf-t, conf t router OSPF2 VRFA no redistribute BGP 65000. Let me to show you the configuration of the OSPF in router 2. Show